welcome to the Beginner's Guide to Infinity Factions Part 2 from the Infinity Institute, from the Dice Gods. My name is Hydra, and yes, we are back for that second part that so many of you have been asking for. As before, we are going to be running through some of the factions, some of the sub-factions, the sectorial armies that make up Infinity N5 as it stands at this point at the end of September 2025. As I said in the previous video, which is linked in the description below, this is designed for new players, for inexperienced players, for players that have their first faction and want to move to a second. This is not designed for veterans. If you are a veteran and you watch this and your comments below is, well, actually, I think this one, okay, that's great. If you're a veteran, the view of these factions and how they fit together is very, very different to how a newbie will experience and see a faction. Additionally, this is my subjective opinion, and opinions are not facts, so your opinion is welcome and that kind of stuff. By all means, give your view and your experience of running these as newer players. But if you're a veteran and you just want to come here and say, you're wrong, you clearly haven't got enough experience, that's not how this works. This is subjective and it's toy soldiers. Calm down. Anyhow, to rate these armies, as before, we can use a rating system out of 5 for the availability, the ease to learn with, and the competitiveness. Again, these are subjective opinions. That's going to be skewed by my meta and the metas that I've played in. If things are different in your meta, that's great. But this is just a starting point for newbies. We're going to talk about key units, important units that new players should be aware of and look at when they are picking up a particular faction. Where possible, we'll include first purchases. Very, very much so with this list. That's not always possible. So there may be some notes for additional useful information. I don't think notes so much in this one, but probably me chatting through some other useful information will happen. As I say, correct as of September 2025. There are currently 38 factions in the game, including the sub-factions, the sectorials, and this is the second 18. So the other 20 are in the previous video. So the objective of this video is to help you make an informed decision for your first faction in Infinity N5 or additional factions if you're new and you're just looking for to sort of help and guidance. I'm not here to tell you which you should play, because the rule of cool is king. If you think something is funky, that's great, go with that. Yes, there are factions inside the game which are more competitive than others, and we're going to talk about that as we go through here. That does not mean to say just because your faction is not competitive in a global meta, ITS ranking, tournament uber player way, that you shouldn't play it, because you should play what you love, you should buy the things you find cool, and that should be your guiding light, especially for your first factions. Cool is more important than any other metric that you can play, so please keep that one in mind. Now let's get into it with the big hot tamale at the moment, Combined Army. They're about to get a new sectorial in the coming months, we know that, in New Wave, but we're going to talk about the ones that are out, and we do know right now. How the new sectorial New Wave will impact this, we can't be sure. How it will change things, whether the actual other armies will get any sort of changes in the face of New Wave, we don't know. But as it stands right now, Combined Army generic. Availability is pretty good. One of the downsides of this is their main starter pack is one of the old 6 miniature starter packs. There isn't a action pack or something like that with 10 miniatures. You have to buy the 6 and then bolt things on. It can make it a little bit more expensive, a little bit of a faff. Plus, a lot of stores that stock Infinity won't necessarily stock the old 6 miniature starter packs, so you may have a little bit of a harder time getting hold of that. How easy is it to learn? Fairly, actually. It's fairly easy to learn. One of the things with this particular army is that it's sort of built around a lot of powerhouse units, which are then powered by order-generating cheaper units. And that can mean that if you get those particular powerhouse units right, you're going to have an easy time. If it doesn't sort of click with you, it can fall apart really easily. If you come across a savvy opponent who takes out your order pool, it doesn't matter how many wounds your avatar's got left. If he's got no orders to power him, he's not doing anything. So it can be a little bit nuanced to learn. Competitiveness, at the moment, it is widely accepted that Combined Army are in a pretty strong place and are pretty potent with some of the units and what they can do. And the thing is, you have these powerhouse units and they are very versatile and they have a lot of different things that they can do, and they can do all of those things well. The fact you then have these cheap units to power them just makes that more horrific. You know, if you have a unit that's got mimetism, so it's harder to hit, and some armor and multiple wounds and ways of regaining those wounds as well, they just become really, really potent. And that's where Combined Army kind of is at the moment. They're in a pretty strong spot. So playstyle, a range of versatile potent units backed up by some cheap order generators. That's what you're looking at here. You're going to take some cool stuff and you're going to throw it at the enemy and hope it doesn't die, because if it does, the rest of your army is predominantly fluff. It doesn't mean to say that it's defenseless, but it's mostly fluff. Pros and cons. They hit hard and they can overwhelm and adapt on the fly. The fact that you have units which have multiple uses and multiple things that they can do well means that if they achieve their objective, or if suddenly they need to pivot from one type of combat to another, a lot of the units in Combined Army can do that quite comfortably and convincingly. Downsides, some of the units are a bit expensive. They're a bit good, so they're a bit expensive, and they can be taken apart. If you have a enemy that gets into your back rank where your order generators are and starts taking those apart, you're going to have a bad day. But that's true of any army. That's not specifically a Combined Army generic issue, but it is more keenly felt here because you do need that battery of orders to power the good stuff. Key units to check out: the Avatar, Anathematics, Bit and Kiss. These are very flavourful. You know, the Avatar and Anathematics are mnemoniker units, as was. I think they're still called mnemoniker, but anyway, they're a very specific type of unit that fits very well inside of Combined Army generic. It's only really available here, and they're very potent as well as gorgeous miniatures, so you should definitely check them out. The guy on the right here is the Carontid, which is another version of the Anathematic Avatar family. First purchases, that Combined Army starter, as I say, which is not necessarily the best choice in the world, but it is a choice that you can make. And the Combined Army Expansion Pack Alpha will get the first of those battery units for you. Nice and cheap, but give you regular orders to power the good stuff, the crunchy stuff that you need. Next up we have Math, more Aggression Force. We have Space Monkeys. They are cross. Someone stole the bananas. Violence will happen. Availability, good. We have plenty of the new style reinforcements and fire team boxes available. They also have their own army pack, so yeah, you can pick these up relatively easily as of this point, and you can get all of the options and just stick them together. Are they easy to learn? Yes, because Monkey do. Monkey do the thing. And the thing that the Monkey do is the violence. That's their whole shtick, that's their whole purpose, and that's their whole tactic. So it's relatively easy to learn. Hit the enemy until they stop. That's it. That's the whole thing. They also have some nice features in there. They have smoke and things like that can get them up the board with a degree of protection. They have more spectral visor units that can shoot through the smoke. So they have some tricks, but not very many. They're relatively straightforward and really easy to learn. Are they competitive? Yeah, fairly. Sometimes they can be a little bit light on specialists to do missions, but overall they are, yeah, they're in a pretty good place, to be honest with you. Not as nasty as generic, but still pretty potent. Their playstyle is violence, kill, destruction, death, and they have some flexible fire teams because most of the units can sort of be smushed together in these uber fire teams. So you can do these flexible different groups that do different jobs, which is really, really cool. But predominantly, your main aim is going to be hitting the enemy with either bullets or swords or both. That's it. So, pros and cons. Monkeys do not care about losing their lieutenant or being isolated. They don't. Those things don't impact most of the more Aggression Force. They just don't care about it. And they have a high output. When Monkey open fire, Monkey do violence, Monkey kill stuff. They do lots of output of violence. They do lack tricks, which is not great. You tend to put your army down on the board and your enemy then knows what it is with some, the Rasyat, which we'll talk about in a second, as an airborne deployment trooper. But for the most part, you're putting your stuff down on the board and going, this is what I'm going to hurt you with. Which is both liberating and scary. But if you get an experienced player on the opposite side of the board, they'll go, cool, there's my target prioritization list. So it can be a downside that they are so straightforward. They can also be a victim of a solid defense and sneak attacks. If you have nasty tricks that you can play on a Morat force, then it's not necessarily going to have as good an answer as some other armies. They will try and respond to pretty much anything with shoot it, or stab it, or both. That's going to be the answer to most stuff. So, it's not the most nuanced of playstyles, it's not the most nuanced of armies, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when learning. Units to look out for: Krakot, very, very cool unit. The Rasyat at the moment is king for a lot of people. It's an airborne deployment trooper that can just wreak havoc on the enemy. And Datarazzi are a much have for a lot of people. They have the smoke, they have impetuous, they move down the board quickly, they're very good in close combat. They're just generally a little murder ball of unpleasantness that doesn't cost a lot of points. So if you do lose them, which you probably will, it doesn't really matter. You're kind of fine. First purchase is the big Morat Aggression Force action pack, perfect, and then the Datarazzi box, because that's a really important, I would say. That's something that you should definitely look at taking if you're playing Morats. Next up we have the Shazvasti. Plenty of Shaz in the world, you can pick Shaz up pretty easily. They're not that easy to learn, and they're not that competitive at this point. Why is that? Because these are sneaky bugs. They aim for asymmetric warfare. They have lots of tricks, but not a lot of wounds. They're not particularly adept at soaking up bullets. They tend to sort of go smush. So they have a very unique playstyle. There's so much camo. There are so many tricks in here. We have impersonation units. We have camo units to put down multiple camo markers. We have hidden deployment troopers. We have hidden deployment missile launchers and forward deploying Spitfires that are in hidden deployment as well. There's lots of tricks here, but if you have an opponent who's seen those tricks, then yeah, it's not going to necessarily go that well. And their stats are okay, but they're really relying on stacking those negative modifiers of surprise shot, mimetism, of all this kind of thing on the enemy. Some builds, some armies, if they have sensor, if they have MSV1 or multispectral visor at all, Shaz starts having problems, and that does make them quite unforgiving to play against. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong quickly, and the wheels tend to fall off and everything catches fire and falls over quite quickly with Shaz, so that can be the case. And that stops them being competitive, because seasoned players will look at it and go, oh, okay, there's the camo markers, this is roughly what I can expect underneath it, fine, you know? Key units, the Sphinx, that is a light tag, but it's mimetism -6 and it's hidden deployment, so the enemy doesn't know it's there until it's there, which is just unpleasant. The Guilo is pretty much the only decent heavy infantry, arguably, there's not a character, etc., that Shazvasti currently has, and it's a good bit of kit, actually. I have to say, I have always been a fan of the Guilo, and it does some good work. Yeah, in fact, it's the only heavy infantry they've got these days. So, and the Noctifer is hidden deployment missile launcher or Spitfire. It's filth. Noctifers can do a lot of work, and they can be absolute nightmare fuel for your enemy. So, definitely worth checking out. Very cool miniatures too. First purchase is Shazvasti action pack, Nox Trooper box. That gives you some light infantry fire teams that can start powering up your army and generating your regular orders. From there, it depends which particular type of flavour you want to go for. Whether you want more camo infiltrators, what flavour you want those to be. There's choices to be made. So the action pack and Nox Trooper box is a very good core place to start, however. Then we have the Onyx Contact Force. Availability, again, it suffers from having the Combined Army Starter as its main place to be. It's okay-ish to learn, and it's okay-ish competitive. That's going to be a controversial one. There's going to be some people that are absolutely going to tell me I'm wrong on that one. But the playstyle is an elite, light, and medium infantry setup. That's kind of what you're looking at here. You've got lots of elite, capable units. They're not necessarily cheap, but they can do lots of things. They're doing pretty well. They have lots of tags, lots of heavy armour that can back them up, and some oddball line troopers in there. You have the Unidrons, which are actually structure, and they're technically remotes, and they've got plasma, and they don't have... Their line troopers are pretty interesting. Pros and cons: powerhouse units, they hit fast, they hit hard, but they can't necessarily take a beating back. And there are some very specific builds that work really well in Onyx. When you start moving away from those, your sort of efficiency drops off, which means your opponent's going to know what's coming, makes them predictable. And because you are so elite, you may not have as many warm bodies on the board as an enemy would. And that can be a challenge, especially if you start putting lots of tags in there and lots of the really elite stuff. It can start being low body count and not able to take the counterpunch, which will inevitably come. So there is that. But that said, if you're still loving it, Norkius is a favourite of pretty much anyone in Combined Army that can take him, as are Vector Operators and Unidrons. Very, very cool units. So Combined Army Starter Pack and Reinforcements is the way to go with these guys. That's kind of what you're looking for there to start these off. And that's the Honest Contact Force. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting army. I remember when it landed, and it remains interesting, but I'm still not ultimately convinced by it. So I think there are definitely better options inside of Combined Army than that. Next, Aleph. The good guys. Generic Aleph. Availability is pretty good. There are some things. The challenge with generic is that the availability of the 2 sectorials for Aleph is very, very good, which means that the units that you want for generic Aleph are split between those boxes for the 2 sectorials. So a unit that you may definitely want may be in a box with 2 units that you don't want, and you may have that in both directions for Steel Phalanx, one of the sectorials, and for OSS, the other sectorial. That can make it a bit of a pain in the butt to buy the stuff you specifically want. Is it easy to learn with? In theory, it's easier than it actually is. Talk about why in a second, and the same with competitive. In theory, it's more competitive than it actually is. Playstyle, there's a bit of everything in here. Heavy to light options, there's robots with close combat monsters and all kinds of stuff. It's good at hacking, it's good at range. There's lots of options and there's lots of choice in here, but that makes the army pretty unfocused. You can take stuff that's kind of from column A and column B and column C and column D and column E. That doesn't make for a sort of coherent force that hangs together and has a clear playstyle. What you end up with is lots of stuff, and that stuff is on the board and it's doing stuff, and it doesn't necessarily hang together cohesively. So it can be a little bit unfocused, and for new players especially, that can be a pain. More experienced players, yeah, generic does make a lot of sense because you know how those units fit together in an army. They become cohesive. When you're dealing with it as a new player, it's kind of the temptation is to schlep all the toys together. And when you schlep all the toys together with generic Aleph, you end up with a soup of yuck. So, key units to look at. Marit and Maximus, they're the 2 tags in here. Why look at them? Because it shows you the very different flavours that you have inside of this one faction. Marit is one thing, Maximus is something else, yeah. And then Hippolyta as well, a very different thing again. These are very, very different units that do very, very different things, and it shows you the kind of broad spectrum that can be put into this force, but it also highlights why it can be a bit unfocused. So, first purchase is Aleph Operations Action Pack is where I'd actually start if I was going generic, because I think the Vedic, the OSS side, is probably more interesting as a core than Steel Phalanx. Steel Phalanx, the first sectorial. Availability is good. They've recently been refreshed. All of the stuff's out there. We've got an action pack. We've got multiple boxes that expand on it. It's great. Are they easy to learn with? Yeah, fairly. There is some nuance to playing them. There is some experience that you'll need and some understanding you'll need of how things work. But overall, yeah, they're fairly straightforward. Competitiveness, yeah, they're fairly competitive. These guys can hit hard and they can do a good job. They're not as competitive as others, but you are going to find quite a few players that seeing Steel Phalanx on the other side of the board will be somewhat daunted and somewhat regretting their life choices. Playstyle, they're an elite force with epic heroes of history. If you hit something with Steel Phalanx, they tend to know about it and stay hit. But don't mention there's lots of fire teams inside of Steel Phalanx, so you end up with multiple fire teams doing very specific jobs working together across the board, and that's kind of cool. It's a very unique flavour. It's only one other army that really has that kind of spam of fire teams, and it lets you put together little triads, little groups of 3 troopers doing very specific jobs, or variety of jobs working together. Pros and cons, they're hard-hitting, lots of mimetism. There is just so much mimetism in this faction, it's unbelievable. And then nasty in CC. They're pretty good at shooting, but if you get close to them and they start slapping you around with their swords and their hammers, not good. Cons, there are very few tricks inside of Steel Phalanx by comparison to some other armies. They are relatively straightforward, and when your heroes start getting nuked off the board, which they will, if your opponent has any sense, they're going to be targeting and bringing down your heroes, then the sort of steam can run out of Steel Phalanx. They can run out of some gumption and some capability. So just be aware of that. Key units, Ajax, big dude with a hammer, likes hitting things. Absolutely cool. Okay, similar thing but with bullets. And Myrmidons are kind of the backbone unit that pad out a lot of things inside of Steel Phalanx. They're worth checking out too. Very, very cool units. Very, very nice aesthetic. Kind of Greek themed look. Very cool. So first place is Steel Phalanx Action Pack. That is where I start. After there, it depends what flavour you want to go for. Atalanta is normally a recommended one, the Sniper of Doom, because she is just the hand of God for deleting things. But I'll let you find that one out yourself. Plus, she's got a bunny. Doesn't need a bunny. Then we have OSS, Operations Subsection of the Do for. It's got a long name. OSS will do. Availability is good. We have Action Pack. We have expansion boxes. We have expansion boxes. The expansion boxes, it's great. Are they easy to learn? Fairly, in a similar way to Steel Phalanxes. They have some nuance. They have some details of like when to apply the bullets and where to apply the bullets. So yeah. And equally, that makes the competitiveness okay. Not stellar, but okay. Playstyle, you've got robots, you've got post-humans, you've got more robots, you've got more post-humans, you've got the avatar of specific like concepts of this particular AI slapped into an amazingly overpowered body and fired out into the battlefield. OSS has a good balance of cheap and expensive units. It's got quite an elite structure when you start getting down to it, so you're not necessarily going to end up with a lot of bodies on the board, but not necessarily a bad thing. They are flexible, they can be fast, they are hard hitting, they have some good hacking, they have some good shooting, they have some epic shooting. They can struggle against things that are good against remotes, because a lot of these guys are robots, EM weaponry, hacking attacks. They can be victims to that if you're not lucky. And if you have a savvy opponent, they will start throwing those things at you, and it's going to give you issues. It's going to give you things you need to think about. So, yeah, just be aware of that one. And you're going to look at some expensive units. Your key units, your Azuras, your Yadu, they can be expensive. Devas as well. They can be very expensive units, and that can lead you to a point where you've got to make a choice. Even post-humans, although individually they're cheap, combined they can start getting quite expensive. So you're going to end up with that elite sort of feel. There's also some unique rule types in here, post-humans being a great example of that. You know, the post-human rule only appears in OSS and Aleph generic. That's the only place you're going to see that, and that is something you need to learn. As a newbie, that can make it a little bit harder, because you're like, okay, this is a bit different to everything else. Key units, Azura, Dakini, Deva. Check those out. Fantastic units, lots of flexibility, lots of different options. You know, Azura is the ultimate deliverer of death and destruction. Deva is a baby Azura in many ways. And then you have the Dakini, which is just, I am robot, here I come. Just quick moving, not the best shot in the world, but you're going to get into positions where the enemy doesn't want you. You're going to put violence on them, it's going to be great. And there's lots of different variants of Dakini, as you'll see. Rickshaw and stuff like that, which do different jobs. They're a more refined version of the Dakini for a specific combat role, so those units very much worth checking out. First place is Action Pack and the Dakini Tac Box, actually, because I'm a fan. You get 3 Dakini combi rifles in the OSS box, getting an HMG, getting a sniper rifle, and I think getting a paramedic, which is what's in the Dakini box, along with Deva, who can fire team up with the Dakinis as a pure fire team. Well worth it, and a really good solid core to start from. Tohaa, the Tohaa, whatever you want to call them. Availability. Yeah. No. They are out of production. They have been out of production for a while. If you wish to buy Tohaa at this current moment in time, I'd suggest a kidney on eBay or similar, because they're going to cost you. If you can find them, they're going to cost you. Are they easy to learn with? No, not really. They have a lot of very specific custom rules. They only find them in here. I think there's one rule in here that is only used by one miniature in this faction. So they are very, very nuanced, very, very specific, and you don't see the rules and their structure anywhere else. This is not great. But are they competitive? Yeah, I think they're not bad as an army with their rules and their structure and their points and their capabilities. But the big thing is, you don't see them. So I've seen newer players get completely overwhelmed by Tohaa because it's like, well, what does that do? Well, what's that? How does that even work? Why does it? I don't understand any of this. Why they're different? like steel phalanx, they form multiple fire teams of units that you've not seen before. And that fire team will hit you with a cocktail of different things. Unlike a lot of, or maybe in a more exaggerated form of other fire teams, you'll end up with a guy who's really good at close combat and has a flamethrower, and a guy that's really, really shooty and really capable at shooty, but rubbish at everything else, and a guy who's really good at booping the boop or flipping the switch or doofing the doof. And that's this triad fire team, and they'll go across the board and do violence. If you start taking that apart, it becomes a problem, but you've got to take the damn thing apart in the first place, because a lot of them have got symbio armor, so they've got multiple wounds, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's not pleasant. Pros and cons. They are versatile. Those little triad fire teams are very versatile. They do hit very hard. They are very exotic, which can lead to your opponent not knowing how to deal with what, or even understanding what they're facing. They're interesting. They're flexible. Again, I know that's versatile, but it's worth saying twice. The cons, many odd rules, they're out of production, and if you can get them, they're going to cost you. If you ever find one new in box, they are going to cost you. Units to check out, Nemus Tohaa, the McCalls, and the Keltars as well. Look at those. Symbio mates, symbio bombs, all this kind of stuff. Very, very unique, special rules, very specific rules. Tohaa were interesting, but I have to say the fact that they are dwindling at the moment is not a bad thing, because they are such an outlier in the game, in the way that they work and the way that they do things. So, and first purchases, good luck with that one. I wish you the very greatest of luck. NA2. Now, NA2, non-aligned armies, mercenaries, mercenary corps. We're going to zip through this because, to be honest with you, if you are a newbie, I wouldn't play them. The great thing about non-aligned armies is if you have multiple armies, you come in here and you can probably take 2 of your other armies, smush them together, add in some mercenaries, and get a new army. That's what non-aligned armies are. If you're a new player, what that means is, I've put in all of the discussions to follow, don't recommend you get these rather than what you should buy first, because what you need to buy is the starter pack for this army, and the starter pack for this army, and this expansion, and this box of mercenaries, and then you have your starter for this particular non-aligned army. So I would not recommend, I would not, NOT, capitalized, underscored, written in bold, in your face, recommend starting the game here. Give yourself a couple of years, give yourself a couple of armies, then come here. That said, Druze, availability, ish. You can get the miniatures, but they're going to be spread across different ranges. Easy to learn with? Nope, because you're going to be smushing together different play styles, and you need to understand how those work. Competitiveness, yeah, they're fairly competitive. They're not the best in the world, and they can be a little bit of a pain in the butt to get right, and they can die quite easily. They're not necessarily that tough. But playstyles, you're going to get mercenaries, you're going to get nomads, you can get pano, and others, and you sort of get this mismatched ragtag force of security awesomeness that's a little bit underpowered. The points you pay for it, for the job that it does, not that great. But you have a unique flavour in here. There's all the mercenaries. You get every mercenary in the known universe smushed right here. The troopers, the minis, are quite expensive for the stuff that's unique. Your brawlers and your druids, in my opinion, are a little bit expensive. And you have very limited fire teams. There's not a lot of guys you can get working together. It's focused around a lot of those mercenaries rather than the other stuff that you take. And that means that the builds, to be effective, are quite mono. You kind of want to take this, you want to take that. And some of the things that are inside this particular army aren't in production at the moment as well. That's going to be a theme as well with these non-aligned armies. So, yeah, it's going to be a pain to get hold of. It's going to be a pain to start with. Grow into it, come to it later. Same with the Akari. Again, availability, same issue. Again, easy to learn, same issue. Again, competitive, same issue. This time, it's JSA with Yuching, which makes no sense. Hack and Mercs mixed together. And there is some teeth in there. There's some power. There is some grunt that you get in here. You've got a really flexible army, and it mixes a lot of different flavours. You've got a lot of different places and ways that you can make this work. That does mean you're going to need to know what you're doing. You need to know how JSA works and Yuching works and Hack works to smush those together to end up with a coherent concept, basically. But the cons, you've got some out-of-production miniatures, and there's too many choices. There is a bewildering number of options that can happen inside of Akari, and that means that, as a new player, you can come to it and go, what should I do? And Akari will say, everything! That's a good way to drive yourself completely insane and end up with a force that, candidly, you're too inexperienced to run effectively. So back away slowly, put it on the ground. We'll come back to this later. Key units, Wu Ming from Yu Qing, Druze, Mercs, and War Driver, which you can find in Ariadne. It's a good enough little hacker, absolutely fine. But first purchases don't start here. And in that theme, Dashat, same issues again. This is Hack meets Yu Qing. It's surprisingly potent, but it has some nuance to it. It has some specific ways that it fits together. And there's many great options here. There are some great options. There are some great things you can do. And there are some really great combinations you can stick together. But again, you can end up with an unfocused list. You can stick the wrong things together. If you don't understand how the Hack side and the Yu Qing side and the Mercs that are in here as well sit together, this ain't going to work. So it's easy to create that unfocused list of soupy mess, and it won't do well, and it won't be a great place to learn the system. So key units: Zensha from Invincible Army, Trip Hammers from Shindu Butai and other places, and the Brawlers Mercs. They are great units to look at, and they'll give you a bit of a flavour of what this does. But again, don't start here. And last but not least, for NA2, White Company. Availability, again, easy to learn, again. Competitiveness, actually White Company is a little bit more competitive. It's a little bit more teethy and a little bit more flexible. In here you'll find a blend of Pano, Yu Qing, Mercenaries, and some Aleph bits. It's good at range, it's good up close, and it's good at missions. It's good at all the different things. Notice I didn't say great. It's good. It's, I can do some stuff here, but there's a good range of options here. You've got varied list options as well. But you're going to find it's hard to collect because you're spread across multiple ranges, multiple boxes. There's some out-of-production miniatures as well, and that's, a bit of a pain in the bum. And it's going to take you some effort to make a list. You're going to have to know what you're doing. You're going to have to have a concept of what you're doing before you hit this, or it's just going to go sideways on you. So, key units from Pano, the Kahu, from Yu Qing, the Guilang, fantastic specialist, great little infiltrating specialist. And the Danavas, who's a surprisingly potent LF hacker. Definitely worth having. The picture alone is fantastic. So, great units. Again, NA2. Back away slowly, leave it alone, and come back to the game when you're a little bit more experienced, I'd recommend. Next up, O12. Count people, it's the Fuzz. Generic. Availability is really, really good. Easy to learn with, fairly easy to learn with, and competitive, fairly competitive. If you are an experienced player, if you know what you're doing, or you've got a good grip of the rules, you can sort of put an extra half star on that competitiveness. It is tasty. They're an sort of good all-round force, and there's some elite options in here. As you explained with the police force, you've got some really tough hombres. Flexible troopers at all levels, elite, and they can hit incredibly hard is what you're going to find with this. They've got a really unique aesthetic, really, really cool army, really cool looking, quite intimidating to face, and they have some nice tricks and bits and pieces they can do. But there's quite a few non-lethal weapons in here, which if you're looking to put an enemy down and keep them down, this doesn't do that, especially because a lot of it's gluing people to the floor. If you glue them to the floor, they're still generating orders. This doesn't help you if you're trying to stop an enemy from doing stuff. But the elite units can be expensive to get in the list, and when lost, it does hurt, because they have a lot of stuff with them. You don't tend to just have heavy infantry with gun. It tends to be heavy infantry with this ability and this piece of equipment and this skill and this and this and this and this and this and units, as we've spoken about before. And that can make them a little bit expensive and make your body count a little bit low. Things to look out for: Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, fantastic units. Each one of those have really good utility, really good capability, and they are quite focused in what they do. They have some give around the edges of what they can do, but they have very specific roles that are clear on the battlefield, and they do those incredibly well. First purchases, O12 Action Pack, and the Zeta tag, actually, just because it's freaking cool. Anytime you can tape a hyper-rapid magnetic cannon, you should. You owe it to yourself. Starmada. Space Dudes. Low Space Dudes. Availability, good. Again, Action Pack. Lots of different expansion boxes out there, so, yep. Easy to learn. Yeah, ish, fairly, kind of, yeah. That kind of needs to be a 3.5 star, more than a 4. Yeah, 3.5 star. Competitiveness, again, this would actually probably be a 3.5 to 4 rather than a 4 to 4.5 as we have with generic. Why? because these are very fire team centric. You can put together flexible, customizable fire teams that do a great job, but that means you need to understand how those work and how to use them and how to apply them effectively. So it can make them a little bit more challenging to learn, because you need to, in the list writing phase, have a very clear vision about what that particular fire team is going to do, craft it, and then apply that on the board. It can make it a little bit more tricky if you're inexperienced, especially if you've not played war games before. It can make it a little bit tougher. And getting the most out of the army, as I say, it takes game knowledge. You're going to have to build experience on this one, and that will mean that if you're coming into this to a new community, if you're starting this out with friends to start off with, you may find you just get your butt kicked because you're using a spanner to open a tin of beans. It's just not what it's for, and then when you find what it's for, it makes sense, this is great. But there are some funky units in here, do not mistake me at all, and they are definitely capable, and when you get your eye in with it, your opponents won't appreciate that. And this is a good thing. So, key units, robots. If you've seen Terminator Salvation, there they are. Epsilon and Bronze, good core units you should check out. Absolutely, they give you a good flavour of what this particular faction is about. It's a very funky faction. They've got a really nice aesthetic to them as well. All of O12 does, but for me, Star Marder especially does. You start out with the Action Pack and Beta Troopers. Beta Troopers, as I normally say, but for my American fans, Beta Troopers. Very, very cool units. Very, very interesting in what they do. Torchlight Brigade, the latest addition to O12, Sword 4. Gotta love these guys. Availability is very good because they're relatively new, sectorial, last couple of years. We have Action Pack, we have a Reinforcement Packs, we have all kinds of stuff for this. Are they easy to learn with? Yeah. They're as subtle as a brick in the face, and they're incredibly resilient, and they're incredibly forgiving. That means they're really easy to learn with. And you look at the units, you can kind of see what they're for. That Silver Star Prime on the side of the screen there, he's got a big gun, and he's really big and stompy. He also has a really big blade in his other hand. That probably means you need to stab stuff and shoot stuff. Yes, you do. That's what he does. That's his thing. In many ways, Torchlight was the first sniff of where N5 was going to go, in the way that it was designed and the way that the units were designed to work together. So the playstyle for this army is heavy infantry. Even the line infantry are heavy. You know, Silver Star Rovers are kind of the light, air quotes, infantry of this force, and they are heavy, and they are tough, and they will hurt you. There's some really unique flavorful units in here. There's a lot of extra bolt-on bits and pieces, but nothing too bewildering. They're actually quite straightforward in the extras that they get. And when you, as an opponent, come across them, it's kind of like, right, this guy has got lots of armour. He shoots really well. When I shoot back at him, I get negative modifiers. If I do hit him, and he does fail his armour save, he's got multiple wounds. It just... They're relentless, and they can feel incredibly overwhelming. And if an enemy lets you get to the point where you're dominating the board, the game is well on its way out, unless they're a very experienced player. So, pros, heavy units which hit hard, big guns, do violence, more violence. They still have the sort of glue to the floor weaponry, but you've probably got a bigger gun to deal with it than that, so don't worry about gluing them, just shoot them. They also have incredible amounts of BTS. I think there's something like only 2 of the Torchlight specific units don't have BTS. Everything else has at least 3. Some of it's up to 9, which if you're trying to hack it or you're trying to do like viral weaponry, it doesn't care. EM weaponry even, it's just going to be like, yeah, no, whatever mate, I don't care about that. But these expensive units can mean that you end up with smaller lists, which can be a problem if you start losing people. So. Key units, the Silver Star Prime, big shooty boy. The Raven Eye Lieutenant is a cornerstone of this list because he's just hides himself, keeps your LT safe. It's all kinds of sneaky stuff. And the Silver Star Rovers, they're the line infantry of this force, and they're just incredibly potent even in themselves. So Torchlight Action Pack, Reinforcements O12 Pack, that will get you rocking and rolling with Torchlight. Next and last, we look at JSA, the newer faction. These guys got completely revamped with the arrival of N5, which they needed. It's good to see. Let's look at them. First up, JSA generic. Availability is okay. They kind of spread across a few boxes, and some of the bits that you need are kind of in different places. Some things are not as widely available as you'd like. Are they easy to learn? Yes-ish. And there are some things that have some nuance and take some consideration to learn. Are they competitive? At the moment, no. Generic JSA is not that competitive, in my opinion. They do have a solution to every problem. They have bikes, they have ninjas, they have gunfighters, they have heavy hitters, they have specialists of all flavours. This is all great. What's the great thing about them? They have all of the JSA options. All of the JSA things you'd ever possibly want are in this faction. So that's great. But what it also means is that they are a bit unfocused. There's not enough of one particular playstyle to form a cohesive force. So you end up with kind of stuff that sort of doesn't really fit together, nailed together in the same list. This is not great. Key units, Kaisotsu. The Kaisotsu, the line infantry, have got a really nice glow up recently. Genbutai, really, really cool units. And Ryokan Unit 9, also very, very cool units. Start with the JSA Army Pack. After that, it's a matter of taste, because there are so many different options here. Which way you go will depend on how you want to play the game. So, next up, we have the brand new shiny boys, Shindenbutai. Subsequently, their availability is fantastic. Are they easy to learn? I'd say no. I would say definitely not. Are they competitive? Yeah, I'd say they are. So, what we have here is flexible fire teams matched with hard-hitting solos, visibility control, and close combat monsters. You have a very specific way of playing, but that does mean that it can be quite unforgiving. On the plus side, they have a very dynamic playstyle. They're very N5. You'll see there's lots of and units in here, and they are competitive in the way that they are structured and what they do. But they do take some skill to play well. They are not the heaviest armies. You're not going to have a lot of multiple wound miniatures here. You are going to find guys that just die when they take their first hit. But there is some nice tricks. There are some nice combos and ways of playing here, which other enemies won't have seen before, and gives you a flexibility on the board that a lot of armies would die for, to be honest with you. Key units, Tanuki, core to this army. The Tanuki are core to this army, very much so, as are the Hatamoto. Big boys, big guns, do violence, don't die. That's their kind of shtick. And the Metsuki officer is phenomenal, a great example of a very focused unit. It is your lieutenant. Everyone knows it's your lieutenant. That doesn't matter. It's probably going to survive. It's probably not worth killing. So, yeah, Metsuki's fantastic and well worth checking out. First purchases at the moment, you are looking at Operation Sandtrap and then Shindenbutai Expansion Pack Delta. Those are the places that I'd start. In the fullness of time, over the coming months, I would expect Operation Sandtrap to disappear and to be replaced with a action pack of some description containing 10 miniatures. But for the time being, as of this point, that's where you need to begin. And then at last we come to Oban. So Oban is probably what looks like the most sort of old school JSA as it used to be. So availability is fairly good at the moment. You've got, quite a few bits and pieces there out there. There are a few bits that are hard to get hold of, but predominantly you're okay. They're relatively easy to learn with because it's quite a flexible army and they're quite competitive. Not massively, but they are quite competitive. You'll find in here that there's a great mix of heavy troopers, bikes, sneaky ninjas. They hit very, very hard and they can take a punch or two in return because you will find quite a few cheap 2-wound, heavily armoured heavy infantry in here, which is really, really cool. They have a good range of playstyles. You have the ninjas, you have the gunfighters, you have the killer robots like the Karakuri on the right of the screen there. You have these various different ways of playing this, and it works. They're very capable. On the downside, there are some older models in here. The ninja units can take some skill to play, and some of the units here they're expensive for what they are. So a heavy infantry, by comparison to other heavy infantry in other factions, may be about the same, but it will have less features on it. And that can be the case. So, yeah, they can be a bit points expensive by comparison to other factions, and that can hurt them a little bit. Key units to check out. We have the Karakuri, the robots, very much so. I think they're one of the best units in the game. Check those guys out, they're brilliant. Shinobu Kitsune, which is spelt wrong. Cute. She's ultimate ninja of death, and the Kaisotsu again, because they're just a very, very capable light infantry and got some really interesting builds, especially that Thunderbolt build. Check that one out. Very cool. Where to start with this one? JSA Army Pack, obviously. A Tanko box, because very, very cool heavy infantry, very cheap. And they also have a disco baller on them, which is completely bonkers. And then the JSA Booster Pack Alpha. That's where I begin with Oban. And that's everything. From here, a big thank you to our patrons and members, especially Chris Sexton and Mr. Jesher at Archangel level, Nephilim, Jim Gallahan and Michael Rowan. You guys absolutely are doing fantastic work. And actually, all of you people watching this video, this wouldn't be possible without these people whose names you see on screen now. So if you can do, please consider joining them either here on YouTube or there on Patreon. Either is great and appreciate having you. And you can join us over on Discord, ask all the questions, everything you need to know. Any questions you have on this, you can put them there in Discord and get answers from me and other members of the community as well. Alternatively, do please put your questions in the comments below. But for now, do please like, share and subscribe. Get the word of the Dice Gods out there. We hope that this was useful to you and look forward to lots more videos coming for Infinity N5 from the Dice Gods and the Infinity Institute very soon. Take care and goodbye.